My son gave me a luxurious 5-day island vacation and smiled, saying, "You deserve this trip, Dad." But those were the cruelest words I'd ever heard. When I rushed back home to grab my forgotten heart medication, I stood frozen when I heard him laugh coldly through the door. "It's a one-way ticket. The old man will never come back." Tutisa betrayed and abandoned, but I didn't cancel the trip. I quietly boarded that ferry to the island to make sure that ticket would become the beginning of his own destruction. Welcome to today's story. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below, telling me where you're listening from. I love hearing from you. Quick note, this narrative blends fictional elements with lessons worth learning. Any similarities to actual names or places are coincidental, but the message here could change how you see things. My name is George Harper. I'm 67, a retired math teacher, and until that Wednesday in late May, I believed my son loved me. The gift arrived 2 weeks earlier, a cream envelope with gold trim. Inside an itinerary for a 5-day luxury retreat at Serenity Island Resort off the Florida Gulf Coast. All expenses paid. Daniel had signed the card himself. "Dad, you deserve this. Love, Daniel." I held that card at my kitchen table in the house where I'd raised him alone after his mother passed. The house I'd taken a second job to keep. This was proof that all those years, all those sacrifices, had meant something. My son finally saw me. I was a fool. That Wednesday I woke before dawn. The ferry left at 9, and I'm the kind of man who arrives early for everything. At 7:30, I was in a cab heading to the terminal, my duffel beside me and strange lightness in my chest. Then I realized I'd forgotten my heart medication. No panic, just quiet recognition that I'd left the orange bottle on my bathroom counter. I asked the driver to turn around. 10 minutes later, we were idling in front of my house again. I told him I'd be 2 minutes. I unlocked the door. The house was silent. Then I heard a voice, Daniel's voice, coming from the kitchen, loud, clear, on speakerphone. I froze. I should have called out, walked in, said hello. But something in his tone stopped me. He sounded sharp, impatient. Not the careful, polite version he used around me. I stood behind the half-open kitchen door and listened. "It's done," Daniel said. "He's leaving this morning. One-way ticket. The resort ferry runs once a week. He doesn't know I didn't book the return. He'll figure it out Thursday, maybe Friday. By then it'll be too late," Jessica's voice responded. My daughter-in-law. Clipped businesslike. "And your man on the island? Already in place. He'll wait until the 4th night. Make it look like an accident. Heart attack, maybe a fall. Nobody will suspect an old man who fell overboard." I stopped breathing. "How much?" Jessica asked. "Why, 800,000. 350 from life insurance, 450 from the house. Clean." "Not good. We'll be in Mexico before anyone asks questions." Daniel laughed, cold, satisfied, empty. "Easiest money I'll ever make." The world tilted. I steadied myself against the wall, heart hammering. I wanted to burst in, to scream, to ask why. But I didn't. Because in that moment, standing in the hallway of the house I'd worked 2 jobs to keep, I understood something. If I confronted him now, he'd deny it. Say I misheard, that it was a joke. I'd have nothing, no proof. Just the word of a 67-year-old man against his son. So I turned around, grabbed my medication, and left. The cab driver was scrolling his phone when I climbed back in. "Got it." "Yeah, I got it." We drove in silence. I didn't think about calling the police. What would I tell them? That I'd overheard a phone call, they'd ask for evidence, ask why I didn't record it. Instead, I made a different call. I found the number for Howard Brennan, the lawyer who'd helped set up my will 3 years ago. He answered on the second ring. "George, everything all right?" "No, it's not." I told him everything. The phone call, the one-way ticket, the plan to stage my death. Howard went quiet. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. "George, you need to go to the police right now." and tell them what I don't have proof. If I accuse Daniel now, he'll destroy whatever evidence exists. I need to go to the island. Find out who he hired, what the plan is. Then we'll have something solid. George, Howard, please. I'm not a fool, but I need help. Can you get someone to watch my back quietly? A pause, then reluctantly. I know someone. Former Coast Guard does private security. Victor Bennett. If I can reach him, I'll have him on the island before you arrive. Thank you. George, you don't have to do this. Yes, I do. I hung up. The ferry was boarding. Families with coolers, couples holding hands, retirees with sun hats and paperbacks. I walked up the ramp with my duffel, my medication, and strange, cold clarity. I found a seat near the back, away from the crowd. The engine rumbled, and the ferry pulled away from the dock. I watched the shoreline shrink, the city fading into gray and green. And I thought about Daniel, his 8th birthday. I'd worked a double shift, came home with $20 in tips, bought him the remote control car he'd been eyeing. When he opened it, his face lit up like I'd given him the world. He hugged me so tight. Best dad ever, he'd said. I closed my eyes and felt salt spray on my face. Somewhere ahead on an island I'd never seen, someone was waiting. Someone my son had paid to end my life. Daniel thought I didn't know. Thought I'd walk into this trap blind and grateful, clutching his gold-trimmed card. But I knew, and as the ferry cut through open water toward Serenity Island, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to die on that island. I was going to survive, and I was going to make sure my son faced what he'd done. The ferry's horn sounded low and mournful as the mainland disappeared. I opened my eyes and looked out at endless blue, and I wondered for the first time in my life if I would live to see it again. The ferry cut through open water, carrying me farther from everything I'd known. Families laughed near the bow. A little girl pointed at seagulls. I sat alone near the stern phone pressed to my ear, waiting for Howard to call back. When the screen finally lit up, I answered immediately. Howard. George. His voice was tight. I talked to Victor Bennett. He's willing to help, but George, this is insane. Turn that ferry around and go to the police. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. A man 2 rows ahead glanced back, then returned to his newspaper. I told you. I don't have evidence. I didn't record the call. If I walk into a police station now and say my son is planning to harm me, they'll ask for proof. While they're asking, Daniel will know I heard him. He'll cover his tracks. By the time they investigate, I'll have nothing. You'll be alive, Howard said. Will I? If Daniel knows I suspect him, what's to stop him from moving faster? I'm safer if he thinks I'm still in the dark. Silence. I could hear Howard breathing slow and deliberate. You're walking into a trap, he said finally. I'm turning the trap around. Another pause. Then reluctantly. Victor will be on the afternoon boat. He'll check in under his own name, act like a regular guest. He won't approach you unless necessary. Coast Guard for 20 years, private security for 10. If anyone can keep you safe, it's him. Thank you. I'm also bringing in Marcus Reed. Private investigator, used to work white-collar fraud. I want him digging into Daniel's finances. If your son is planning this, there's a reason. Money, trouble, debt, something. Marcus will find it. I nodded. Good. I need to know what I'm dealing with. George, Howard said softer now, almost pleading. You don't have to do this. I looked out at the endless blue water. Yes, I do. I ended the call and stared at the phone. Around me, the ferry hummed with easy vacation chatter. No one looked at me. No one knew. I thought about the last time I'd really talked to Daniel. 6 months ago, I'd driven to his house unannounced with tomatoes from the farmer's market. I used the spare key and let myself in. Daniel was in the kitchen, pacing, phone pressed to his ear. He didn't see me at first. I don't care what it takes, he was saying. I need that money in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Do you understand? He turned, saw me, and went pale. He ended the call immediately, forced a smile. Dad, hey, didn't know you were coming. Just thought I'd stop by, I said, holding up the tomatoes. He took the bag, set it on the counter without looking at it. Thanks. Sorry, work stuff. Stressful client. I nodded. Didn't push. I wanted to believe him, but I'd seen the desperation on his face. 4 months later, I started noticing other things. He stopped coming for dinner. Twice a week became once, then not at all. When I called, he'd keep it short. 5 minutes, maybe less. Always an excuse. I told myself he was busy, that adult children had their own lives. But deep down, I knew something had changed. And now, sitting on this ferry with wind in my face and salt on my lips, I understood what it was. He'd been planning this for months. Not days, not weeks, months. My son, my boy. The kid I'd raised alone. The one I'd worked 2 jobs for had spent months figuring out how to end my life. And he'd smiled at me the whole time. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. Something deeper. But I didn't let myself fall apart. Not here. Not now. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened my messages. I found Daniel's last text from 2 weeks ago. Booked you something special, Dad. You've earned it. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I typed a reply. Just boarded the ferry. Thank you again, son. Can't wait. I hit send. Let him think I was still the fool he expected. Let him think I'd walk onto that island blind and grateful and easy to eliminate. Because when this was over, when I had the evidence, when I'd found whoever he'd paid to harm me and documented every word, every transaction, every lie, then he'd know. He'd know his father wasn't the soft, forgiving man he'd counted on. The ferry horn sounded. I looked up. The island was visible now, a dark smudge on the horizon. Serenity Island. The place my son had chosen to be my ending. I stood, grabbed my duffel, and moved toward the bow where passengers were gathering, pointing at the approaching shore. The sun was bright, the water calm. It looked like paradise, but I knew better. Victor would arrive on the afternoon boat. That meant somewhere on that island, a man I'd never met was preparing to watch my back, and somewhere else, probably in one of those villas, someone Daniel had hired was waiting for me too. 2 strangers, one trying to protect me, one trying to end me, and I was walking straight into the middle of it. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I didn't know if I'd need it, if I'd get the chance to record anything useful, but I set it up anyway. Tested the microphone, made sure the storage was clear. If I was going to be the hunter instead of the prey, I needed to be ready. The ferry slowed the engine, shifting as we approached the dock. I could see the resort, now white villas scattered along the hillside, palm trees, swaying a wooden pier stretching over turquoise water. It was beautiful, and somewhere in that beauty, a plan was waiting. I shouldered my bag and took a breath. Victor Bennett would be there. Howard had promised, and Daniel had no idea. The ferry bumped gently against the dock. A resort employee in a crisp white shirt waved from the pier, smiling, holding a clipboard. Welcome to Serenity Island. I stepped off the boat, onto the pier, feeling solid wood beneath my feet. And I thought, I'm 67 years old. I've spent my whole life being kind, being careful, being the good father. But kindness wasn't going to keep me alive. So I straightened my shoulders, walked past the smiling employee, and made myself a different promise. I was going to survive this island. And when I left, I was taking my son down with me. The dock felt solid beneath my feet. More solid than anything had felt in 24 hours. I stepped off the ferry behind a family with beach bags, their children racing toward white sand. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen, and something sweet, hibiscus maybe. Paradise, if you believed in that. I didn't. Not anymore. A young woman in a crisp white polo stood at the pier base holding a clipboard and a brilliant smile. Her name tag read, Linda. Welcome to Serenity Island Resort, she said, checking my name off. Mr. Harper, right, your villa is ready. Mr. Flynn will take you there personally. She gestured toward a man near a white golf cart. He was tall, mid-40s, deeply tanned, with a rehearsed smile. Same white polo sleeves rolled up. George Harper, he called, hand extended. Connor Flynn, resort manager, it's a pleasure. I shook his hand. Firm grip. Confident. The kind meant to make you trust him. Thanks for having me, I said. Absolutely. Your son arranged everything, said you'd worked hard your whole life and deserved a break. We're honored to host you. The word son landed like a stone in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Daniel's thoughtful that way, I said. Connor gestured to the cart. Let me give you the tour on the way to your villa. Villa 47 is one of our more private units. Quiet, great views. We started up a winding path lined with palms. The resort spread out like a travel magazine. 50 villas scattered across the hillside, each gleaming white with terracotta roofs. The ocean stretched beyond them, impossibly blue. Serenity Island's been family-owned for 30 years, Connor said. 50 villas all-inclusive. We keep it exclusive, no more than 100 guests at a time. Ferry runs once a week Saturdays. Keeps things peaceful. Once a week, I filed that away. We passed the main lodge, open-air dining, a bar overlooking water. Guests lounged with umbrella drinks. A couple played bocce ball. Everything looked carefree, but I wasn't here for that. We turned onto a narrower path away from the main villas. Trees grew thicker. Sounds of laughter faded. Connor kept talking spa beach access hiking trails. I nodded along, but I was counting how far from center, counting how isolated this felt. Finally, we pulled up in front of a villa perched near a rocky bluff. Below, waves crashed against dark stone. The villa was beautiful white stucco, wide windows, a deck with 2 chairs facing the ocean. But it was alone. No neighbors within shouting distance, just trees and cliffs and water. Villa 47, Connor said. One of our best views. I got out, slowly looking around. The path back was narrow and winding. The cliff edge was maybe 20 yards from the deck. Close enough to hear the surf. Close enough to see the drop. Close enough to fall. Connor unlocked the door and handed me the key. Linda will bring your luggage shortly. If you need anything, dial 0. We're here to make your stay perfect. Appreciate it, I said. He drove off, leaving me alone. I stepped inside. The villa was spotless king bed, with white linens, a kitchenette with bottled water, and fruit French doors opening onto the deck. Everything designed to make you forget the world, but I couldn't forget. I walked to the window and looked at the ocean. Stunning view. The kind people saved years to see. And all I could think was, is this where Daniel planned it, where someone's supposed to make me vanish? I pulled out my phone. No signal. Connor had mentioned it, limited cell service Wi-Fi only in the main lodge, isolated by design, perfect for a trap. I was about to unpack when I heard footsteps outside. I froze. Then a voice called out, relaxed and easy. A gorgeous spot, isn't it? I stepped onto the deck. A man stood on the path below, maybe 65, lean and weathered, wearing cargo shorts and a fishing shirt. Gray hair cropped short, sharp eyes that didn't match the tourist vibe. Sure is, I said carefully. He grinned and stuck out his hand. Victor Bennett, Villa 28 just up the hill. Saw you arrive, thought I'd say hello. Us old-timers have to stick together, right? I stared at him for half a second, recognition clicking. Then I shook his hand. George Harper, I said. Victor's grin didn't waver, but his eyes flicked briefly toward the villa, then back. A question. I nodded barely. Well, George, Victor said easily, if you need anything, recommendations, a fishing buddy, whatever, I'm around. This place can get quiet if you're on your own. I'll keep that in mind, I said. He gave a casual wave and started back up the path, whistling off-key. To anyone watching it, would look like nothing. just two guests being neighborly. But I knew better. Victor Bennett was here. Howard had kept his word. I went back inside, closed the door, and locked it. Then I sat on the bed and let myself breathe. For the first time since I'd heard Daniel's voice in my kitchen, I didn't feel completely alone, but I also didn't feel safe. Ferry runs once a week. Saturday. That meant 5 days. 5 days to figure out who Daniel had hired. 5 days to gather evidence. 5 days to stay alive. I unpacked methodically. Clothes in the dresser, toiletries in the bathroom, medication on the nightstand. Then I returned to the deck. The sun was high and hot. Waves rolled in, steady and indifferent. Pelicans glided past. It was peaceful, too peaceful. I walked to the deck edge and looked down. The cliff dropped sharply 30 feet or more, ending in jagged rocks and surf. I could see why Daniel or whoever he'd hired might have chosen this place. An accident here would be easy to stage. A stumble, a fall. A 67-year-old man with a heart condition, enjoying the view, leaning too far. Nobody would question it. I stepped back, hands shaking. Then I felt it. Not a sound, more a feeling. The sense that I wasn't alone, that someone was watching. I turned, scanning the trees beyond the villa. Nothing moved. No one was there. But the feeling didn't go away. I walked back inside, closed the French doors, and pulled the curtains halfway. Then I sat in the chair by the window, angled to see the path and tree line. And I waited. Because if someone was out there, I needed to know. The villa was silent, except for the ceiling fan and distant waves. I sat there watching light shift through the curtains, and I thought about Daniel. About the little boy who'd hugged me on his 8th birthday. About the man who'd laughed about the easiest money he'd ever make. And I thought he chose this place. He chose this villa. He knew about the cliffs, which meant whoever he'd hired knew too. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and set it on the table beside me ready. Because sooner or later, someone was going to make a move. And when they did, I was going to be ready. The afternoon settled into heavy stillness, making every sound feel louder. I'd unpacked and was folding a shirt when my phone buzzed. Daniel. My hand hovered. I considered letting it ring, but that would tip him off. So I answered. "Hey, son," I said, keeping my voice light. Dad." Daniel's voice came through warm, almost too warm. "You made it. How's the resort?" I moved to the window. My other hand reached for the phone's screen, opening the voice memo app. I hit record and set it face down on the table. "It's beautiful," I said. "Really beautiful. You didn't have to do all this." "Of course I did. You've worked your whole life, Dad. You deserve a break." He paused. "So the villa's okay. They put you somewhere nice. In Villa 47, right on the edge of the property. Great view of the water." "Perfect," Daniel said. There was something in his tone. Relief, satisfaction. That's exactly what I asked for. Quiet. Private. "You'll get a real rest there. Private." The word echoed in my head. I looked at the cliff beyond the deck, at the empty path. Private. Isolated. Alone. "It's definitely quiet," I said. "Good. And your heart? You remembered your medication, right?" There it was. The question I'd been waiting for. "I did," I said. "Got it right here on the nightstand." That's good. That's really good." He sounded genuinely relieved, and for half a second I almost believed him. Almost thought maybe I'd misheard that phone call in my kitchen. Then he kept talking. "You know, Dad, at your age, you've got to be careful. Heart conditions are serious. Anything could happen, stress, overexertion, even a bad fall. You've got to take it easy out there." My jaw tightened. He was laying the groundwork, making sure anyone who listened later would hear a concerned son warning his elderly father to be careful. "I'll be careful," I said. I mean it. Don't go hiking those trails or climbing around on rocks. Just relax, enjoy the view, Stay safe. Stay safe. From the man who'd arranged for me to have an accident. I will. Thanks for looking out for me. Always, Dad. Always. Another pause. Jessica says hi, by the way. Jessica. The woman I'd heard on speakerphone asking how much money my death would bring. Tell her I said hi back, Mo. I managed. Hey, I've got to run meeting in 10. But call me if you need anything, okay? I will. Thanks, Daniel. Love you, Dad. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. Then I set it down, stopped the recording, and saved it. My hands were shaking. Love you, Dad. He'd sounded so convincing, so genuine. If I hadn't heard that conversation in my kitchen, I would have believed every word. But I did know, and now I had it on tape. Daniel asking about my heart, warning me to be careful, setting the stage for an accident. It wasn't enough to convict him, not yet. But it was a start. I was still sitting there when I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. Then a knock. 3 sharp raps. I opened it. Victor Bennett stood on my doorstep, hands in his pockets, that easy grin on his face. But his eyes were sharp, scanning the area. George, he said, "No, I got a minute." I stepped aside. He came in. I closed the door, locked it. Victor moved to the window, glanced out, then turned to face me. "All right," he said, his voice lower now, all pretense gone. "Let's talk." Howard filled me in. "Your son's planning something, you're here to gather evidence, and I'm here to make sure you live long enough to use it." I nodded. "That's the short version." "Good. Then we're on the same page." He pulled a small radio from his pocket. "I've got eyes on this place 24/7. You don't go anywhere without me knowing. If someone approaches your villa, I'll know." "How?" "I've been doing this a long time, George. Trust me." I did. I don't know why, but I did. "There's something else," Victor said. "I've been here since yesterday getting the lay of the land, and I've already spotted someone." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Well, don't know his name yet, but he checked in the same day you did. Villa 46, right next door." He jerked his chin toward the wall. "He's been watching you since you arrived. He's not here for vacation. Villa 46, right next door. Close enough to see when I left, when I came back, when I turned off the lights." "What does he look like?" I asked. "Mid-40s, lean, military build, keeps to himself, doesn't talk to other guests, doesn't eat in the dining room. He's a professional, George, and he's here for a reason." My throat went dry. "You think he's the one Daniel hired?" "I'd bet money on it." I sat down, the weight crashing over me. It was real. There was a man next door hired to harm me, waiting for the right moment. Victor crouched down, his eyes level with mine. "Listen to me. You're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'm not letting anything happen to you. But you've got to be smart. No wandering off. No late-night walks. No standing too close to that cliff. You understand?" I nodded. "Well, good." He stood, moved toward the door. "I'm going to keep an eye on Villa 46. See if I can figure out who this guy is, who he's talking to. You just act normal. Let your son think everything's going according to plan." He opened the door, paused. "You're brave, George. Coming here knowing what you know. Most people wouldn't." "I didn't have a choice," I said. "Yeah," Victor said quietly. "You did. And you made the right one." He stepped outside and the door clicked shut. I stood there listening to his footsteps fade. Then I walked back to the window and looked at the ocean. Villa 46, right next door. I couldn't see it from here, the trees blocked the view. But I knew it was there. Knew someone was inside waiting. Military build, professional. Doesn't talk to other guests. This wasn't some thug Daniel had hired. This was someone who knew what he was doing. Someone who'd done this before. I pulled out my phone and listened to Daniel's voice again. "Now, at your age, you've got to be careful. Anything could happen: stress, overexertion, even a bad fall. A bad fall. I looked at the cliff at the drop beyond the deck, and I understood. That's how they were going to do it, and the man in Villa 46 was going to make it happen. As the sun dipped lower, turning the ocean copper and gold, I sat at the small desk and spread out the papers Daniel had sent me. The cream envelope, the printed itinerary, the ferry tickets. I'd looked at them before back home, but I hadn't really studied them. I'd trusted my son. Now I needed to see what I'd missed. The itinerary was simple. 5 days, all-inclusive. Check-in Thursday, check-out Tuesday. Ferry departure Saturday morning, 9 a.m. I flipped to the tickets. There was only one. I stared at it, reading the fine print twice. One ticket. Arrival only. Port Haven to Serenity Island, dated Thursday, May 22nd. No return. I shuffled through the papers again, checked the envelope. Nothing, just the one ticket. I picked up my phone and dialed the front desk. Linda answered, bright and professional. Front desk, this is Linda. How can I help you? Hi, Linda. This is George Harper, Villa 47. I only have an arrival ticket. Is that normal? A pause. Keyboard tapping. Let me pull up your reservation, she said. Then, you're right. There's no return ferry booked. Can I book one now? More typing. The ferry runs once a week, Saturdays at 9 a.m. This week's departure is full guests book at least 2 weeks in advance. The next available seat would be Saturday, June 7th. 2 weeks. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay calm. Is there any other way off the island? Not regularly. Serenity Island is pretty remote. The ferry's the only option unless you charter something privately, and that's expensive. A few thousand at least. I see. Thanks, Linda. I can add you to the wait list for this Saturday's ferry in case someone cancels. Yes, please do that. I hung up. Daniel had done this on purpose. Booked me a one-way trip, knowing I wouldn't realize until I got here. Knowing the ferry only ran once a week. Knowing I'd be stuck, long enough for the man in Villa 46 to finish the job. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. I needed air, needed to think. The evening was warm, the breeze carrying salt and tropical flowers. I walked down the path toward the beach, away from other guests heading to dinner. The beach was quiet. I walked slowly, hands in my pockets, watching the waves, and that's when I saw him. A man standing maybe 50 yards down the beach near the tree line. Just standing there looking at the water. But something about the way he stood made the back of my neck prickle. He was wearing a faded blue shirt, khaki pants, and a baseball cap pulled low. Mid-40s, lean with posture that came from years of discipline. Military, maybe. And he was watching me. I turned, pretending to look elsewhere. When I glanced back, he was still there. Still watching. I started walking back toward my villa. I didn't look at him directly, but I kept him in my peripheral vision. He started walking too. Not fast, not obvious, just following. My heart kicked into a higher gear. I picked up my pace, taking the path through the trees. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Steady, unhurried. I didn't turn around. When I reached my villa, I fumbled with the key, stepped inside, and locked the door. I moved to the window and peered through the curtain. The man in the blue shirt was walking past, heading up the path. He didn't look at me, just kept walking, and then he stopped. Right in front of Villa 46. He pulled a key from his pocket, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. I stood there frozen, watching the door close. That was him. The man Victor had warned me about. The professional. The one Daniel had hired. I pulled out my phone and texted Victor. Just saw him. Blue shirt. Followed me from the beach. He's in Villa 46 now. The response came immediately. I know, I saw. Stay inside. Lock the door. I'm watching. I moved back to the window. Villa 46 was maybe 30 feet away, separated by trees and underbrush. I could see the edge of the deck, the glow of a light through the window, and then I saw him. He stepped out onto his deck, a water bottle in his hand. He stood there for a moment, looking at the ocean. Then he turned. and looked straight at my window. I froze. He couldn't see me, the curtain was drawn, the light off. But it felt like he could. Like he knew exactly where I was. Like he was measuring the distance. Calculating. He took a sip of water, set the bottle on the railing, and leaned against the post, arms crossed. Just standing there. Watching. I stepped back from the window, my breath shallow. This was real. There was a man 30 feet away hired to harm me, and he was watching my villa. Waiting. He stood on that deck for a long time. 5 minutes? Maybe 10? I stood in the shadows watching him, and he stood on his deck watching mine. Finally, he picked up his water bottle, turned, and went back inside. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I sat down in the chair by the window, my phone in my hand, and waited. The night settled in thick and quiet. The ocean murmured beyond the cliff. Somewhere a bird called out lonely and sharp, and through the trees I could see the faint glow from Villa 46. He was in there, close enough to reach me, close enough to hear me if I called out, close enough to finish what Daniel had started. But not tonight. Tonight I was still here, still breathing, still gathering evidence. I looked at the single ferry ticket on the desk. One way, no return. Daniel had trapped me here, made sure I couldn't leave, made sure I'd be alone, isolated, vulnerable. But he didn't know Victor was here. Didn't know I'd figured it out. Didn't know I was recording every conversation, every moment, every piece of evidence. And he didn't know that the man he thought was a helpless fool was sitting in the dark, watching the man he'd hired, and planning his next move. I pulled up the voice memo app, started a new recording. Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m. Confirmed no return ferry ticket. Next available seat is June 7th, 2 weeks from now. I'm trapped here. I paused. Saw the man from Villa 46, followed me from the beach. He's watching my villa. Victor's watching him. I have 5 days to gather enough evidence. 5 days to stay alive. I stopped the recording and saved it. Then I looked back at Villa 46. The light was still on, and I wondered, how long until he makes his move? And when he does, will I be ready? The next morning I woke to waves and pale dawn light. I hadn't slept well. Every creak, every rustle had jolted me awake. But I'd made it through the night, and so had Andrei Volkov. I dressed quickly and headed out. The resort was quiet, just a few early risers jogging or sipping coffee. I walked down to the sand. Victor was already there, standing near the water's edge, looking like any other guest enjoying sunrise. When he saw me, he gave a small nod and started walking. I fell in step beside him. "Rough night?" he asked, voice low. "You could say that." We walked in silence, putting distance between us and the main resort. When we were far enough, Victor stopped. "I've got more on your neighbor," he said. Andrei Volkov, former military, dishonorably discharged 8 years ago. Since then, he's been freelance, the kind of work that doesn't show up on tax returns. What kind of work? The kind people hire him for when they need a problem taken care of quietly. He's good, George. Careful. Professional. Which means we need to be smarter. What's the plan? Tonight, the resort's hosting a bonfire on the beach. Music, food, drinks. Big event. You're going to be there, visible, making conversation, establishing an alibi. Meanwhile, I'll be at your villa with a camera set up. If Volkov makes a move while you're gone, we'll have him on tape. You think he'll try tonight? He's been watching you for 2 days, waiting for an opening. A night when you're distracted, when the resort's busy. Tonight fits. We started walking again. "There's something else," Victor said. "Connor Flynn, the manager who checked you in. I don't trust him." "Why?" "Because he assigned you Villa 47, right next to Volkov. That's not random. The resort's got 50 villas, half were empty when you arrived. Flynn could have put you anywhere. But he put you there, next to a man hired to harm you." The words settled over me like a weight. You think Flynn's involved. I think someone at this resort tipped Volkov off, gave him the villa assignment, made sure you'd be isolated, and Flynn's the one with access to all that information. My phone buzzed. Howard. I need to take this, I said. Victor stepped away. I answered. Howard. George. How are you holding up? I'm still here. Good. Listen, Marcus Reed finished his preliminary report. I'm sending it now, but I wanted to give you the highlights. I heard keys tapping, then the ping of an email. Daniel's in deep. Howard said, his voice grim. He owes $285,000. Gambling debts spread across 3 different lenders. High-interest, short-term loans. The kind people take when they're desperate. My chest tightened. $285,000. What? That's just Daniel. Jessica's got $95,000 on credit cards. Maxed out. They've been living beyond their means for years, George. And now it's caught up with them. I closed my eyes. $380,000. That's what this was about. That's why Daniel had hired Andrei Volkov. Because $800,000, my life insurance, my house, would clear his debts and leave him with change to spare. There's more. Howard continued. Marcus found a forged loan application in your name. Someone tried to take out a home equity loan on your house. $450,000. The bank flagged it, but the paperwork's got your signature. That's not my signature. I know. Marcus is having it analyzed. If it's a forgery, we can prove Daniel did it. But George, this means he's been planning this for months, maybe longer. I thought about the phone call I'd overheard. The calm, detached way Daniel had talked about ending my life. The way he'd laughed. Send me everything Marcus has, I said. I will. But George, please be careful. These people are desperate. I know. I hung up and stood there staring at the water. $285,000. $95,000. $450,000 in forged loans. My son had tried to steal my house. And when that hadn't worked, he'd decided to take everything else. Victor walked back over. Bad news. Daniel owes $285,000 in gambling debts. Jessica owes $95,000 on credit cards. They tried to forge a loan on my house. Victor let out a low whistle. That's motive. That's desperation. We stood in silence. The sound of waves filling the space between us. I thought about Daniel's college graduation 20 years ago. I'd taken a personal day drove 4 hours to the ceremony, sat in the bleachers with a disposable camera and a heart full of pride. Afterward, he'd found me in the crowd and hugged me tight. I couldn't have done this without you, Dad, he'd said. I'd believed him. Now I wondered if he'd ever meant it. George, Victor's voice pulled me back. You still with me? I nodded. Yeah, I'm here. Good. Because we've got work to do. Tonight, you're going to that bonfire. You're going to smile, drink a beer, make small talk. You're going to be the most visible guest on this island. And while you're doing that, I'll be watching your villa. If Volkov makes a move, we'll catch him. And if Flynn's involved, we'll catch him too. And if they don't, then we wait another day. But one way or another, George, this ends soon. You've got 5 days on this island. We're going to make them count. I looked at him, this stranger Howard had sent to protect me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. All right, I said. Let's do it. Victor nodded. Get some rest. Eat something. Tonight's going to be a long night. And George, whatever happens, don't go back to your villa alone. Not until I give the all clear. Understood. He walked back toward the resort. His pace easy, just another guest enjoying the morning. I stood there longer, watching the sun climb higher, the ocean turning from gray to blue. $285,000. That's what my life was worth to my son. Not love, not family, not 38 years of sacrifice, just money. I walked back to my villa, locked the door, and sat at the desk. Tonight the bonfire, tonight the trap, Tonight, we'd see if Andrei Volkov was as good as Victor thought, and if he was, we'd see if we were better. I looked out the window at the ocean, at the cliffs, at the narrow strip of trees separating my villa from Villa 46. Somewhere over there, Andrei was waiting, planning, calculating. But so was I. And tonight, one of us was going to make a mistake. I just had to make sure it wasn't me. The afternoon heat pressed down on Villa 47 like a weight. I'd spent hours reviewing Marcus Reed's report, reading through Daniel's debts line by line. $285,000. Gambling. High-interest loans. Desperation. I was staring at credit card statements when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then remembered Victor's words. Act normal. Don't let them know you're watching. I swiped to answer and tapped the voice memo app, setting the phone on speaker to record. Hello, Dad. The voice was bright, warm, syrupy, sweet. Jessica. I'm so glad I caught you. How are you? How's the island? I forced my voice to stay light. Jessica. Hi. I'm good. The island's beautiful. Oh, I'm so relieved. Daniel's been worried sick about you. A pause. Daniel told me about your heart medication. You remembered it right. My jaw tightened. She was probing, making sure I had the medication, making sure the groundwork for a heart attack was in place. I've got it, I said. Right here on the nightstand. Oh, thank goodness. You know how dangerous it can be if you skip even one dose, especially at your age. Stress, heat, exertion, it can all add up. She was laying the narrative, building the excuse. I'm being careful, I said. Good, so what are your plans for tonight? Anything fun? I kept my voice casual. There's a bonfire on the beach. Thought I might stop by. A bonfire, how lovely. What time does it start? 8, I think. Perfect. And you'll be there the whole evening. The question hung in the air, too specific, too pointed. Oh, probably, I said. Why? Oh, no reason. I just want to make sure you're having a good time. You deserve it, Dad. I appreciate that. Well, I won't keep you. But call us if you need anything, okay? I will. Thanks, Jessica. Love you, Dad. The line went dead. I sat there, heart pounding. Then I stopped the recording, saved it, and texted Victor. Need to talk, now. He replied instantly. Beach, 5 minutes. Victor was waiting near the water. When I approached, he nodded toward the tree line. What happened? I handed him my phone with the recording cued. Jessica called. Victor listened twice. Then he looked at me. She's running point, he said quietly. This isn't Daniel's operation. It's hers. What do you mean? Listen to the questions. She wanted to know if you'd be at the bonfire, how long you'd be there, whether you'd be alone. That's not concern, George. That's logistics. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Marcus Reed, I answered, putting it on speaker. George, I've got something. Marcus set his voice tight. I've been tracking Jessica's phone records. She's made 17 calls to a number registered to Serenity Island Resort. Whose number? Connor Flynn, the resort manager? Victor and I exchanged a look. The last call was 2 days before you arrived. May 20th. Marcus continued. The day Daniel gave me the envelope. Marcus, this is Victor Bennett. Can you trace any payments between Jessica and Flynn? Working on it. But George, one more thing. Jessica Harper isn't her real name. I froze. What? She changed it 9 years ago. Her birth name was Jennifer Walsh, and Jennifer Walsh was married before she met Daniel to a man named Brian Walsh. Brian Walsh drowned in a boating accident 8 years ago. He had a $200,000 life insurance policy. Jessica was the sole beneficiary. The world tilted. Shakikaum. The case was ruled accidental, Marcus said. But the lead detective noted several inconsistencies in Jessica's statement. Not enough to charge her, but enough to raise questions. I couldn't breathe. My son had married a woman who'd done this before. A woman who'd taken a life for money and gotten away with it. Marcus, and I said out of my voice hoarse, "Send me everything you've got on Brian Walsh. I'll email it in 10 minutes. The call ended. Victor and I stood in silence. "She's done this before," I said finally. "Looks that way. And Connor Flynn's helping her." "Tonight," Victor said. "She called to confirm you'd be at the bonfire. That means Volkov's moving tonight. She wanted you out of your villa distracted visible, so when Volkov makes his move, it looks like you were somewhere safe and still had an accident." "What kind of accident?" Victor's gaze drifted toward the cliffs beyond my villa. "The kind that happens when someone goes back to their room after a long evening, when they step out onto the deck for one last look at the ocean, and they lean too far. A fall. They'll say I was drunk," I said quietly, "or tired, or careless. And Jessica will cry at your funeral," Victor said flatly, "and she and Daniel will collect $800,000, and no one will ever know." I looked at him. Except us. Except us." Victor checked his watch. "Bonfire starts at 8. That gives us 5 hours. I'm setting up the camera in your villa and positioning myself where I can see both your door and Volkov's. If he moves, I'll know. What do you need from me? Go to the bonfire. Be visible. Talk to people. Stay there until I text you the all clear. And George, no matter what happens, do not go back to your villa alone. Not until I say it's safe." "Understood." Victor walked back toward the resort. I stood there longer thinking about Jessica. Jennifer Walsh, the woman who'd called me Dad with that too sweet voice. The woman who'd done this before. I turned and walked back toward my villa, the sun hot on my back. Tonight the bonfire. Tonight the trap. And tomorrow, if we were lucky, we'd have enough to bring them all down. Jessica Harper, Connor Flynn, Andrei Volkov, and Daniel. I just had to survive the night first. The bonfire roared against the darkening sky flames twisting in the ocean breeze. Tiki torches lined the beach, and a steel drum band played near the water's edge. Guests milled around with drinks, laughing, dancing, soaking in the kind of carefree evening tropical resorts were built for. I walked into the middle of it, forcing a smile, forcing myself to look like a man with nothing to worry about. But my heart was hammering. A server offered me a drink, something fruity in a coconut shell with a paper umbrella. I took it and moved toward the fire, visible where anyone could see me. A couple waved me over, introducing themselves as Tom and Linda from Ohio. I made small talk about the weather, the resort, laughed at Tom's joke, smiled when Linda asked if I was here alone. "Just me," I said. "My son gave me this trip as a gift." "Well, he was right," Tom said, raising his drink. "Here's to relaxing." We clinked our coconut shells and I took a sip. I needed to look like I belonged here. Needed to look distracted, because 30 yards up the hill, Victor was inside my villa, and Andrei Volkov was watching. I excused myself and wandered toward the band. A man teaching salsa waved me over. "Come on, don't be shy. I'm Nathan. You look like you've got rhythm." I laughed, shaking my head. "Not sure about that." I felt my phone buzz. I pulled it out, angling the screen away. A text from Victor. "He's moving." My breath caught. I glanced up toward the dark hillside where Villa 47 sat. Then I forced myself to look back at Nathan, to smile. "You all right?" Nathan asked. "You look pale." "Just warm," I said. "I'll grab some water." I stepped away and opened Victor's text again. "He's moving." I typed back, thumb shaking. "Where?" The response came fast. "Left Villa 46 3 minutes ago. Heading toward yours. Cameras live. Torres is in position. Sam Torres, the head of resort security." Victor had brought him in this afternoon, shown him the evidence. Torres hadn't needed much convincing. I scanned the crowd for Connor Flynn. He was near the bar, talking to a couple, his smile warm and professional. He had no idea we knew. My phone buzzed again. "He's at your door. Master key." Flynn gave it to him. "Master key." I felt fury rise in my chest. Connor Flynn had given Andrei Volkov a key to my villa. Made sure he could walk in, no forced entry, no signs of a break-in. I looked across the beach. Flynn was laughing, looking for all the world like a man who cared. I typed back, "Torres ready. Waiting. Let him get inside. Need him on camera." I stared at the words. Let him get inside. That meant Andre was opening my door right now, stepping into my villa. I put my phone away and took a long sip of my drink to steady myself. The woman next to me was talking about her grandkids. I forced myself to listen to nod, but inside I was counting seconds. My phone buzzed. "He's inside. Camera has him. Torres moving now." I exhaled. The trap had worked. I wanted to run up that hill and see it myself, but I couldn't. Not yet. I had to stay here visible, surrounded by witnesses. So I stayed. I stood by the fire talking to strangers about nothing. While 30 yards away, Sam Torres and his team were closing in on Andrei Volkov. The minutes dragged. 10:22, 10:25, 10:27. My phone buzzed. Him. I stared at the words, my chest tight. "I'm secured. Torres has him in custody. Flynn next." I turned, scanning for Connor. He was still by the bar, still smiling. And then I saw Sam Torres walking toward him. Torres moved casually, unhurried. He said something to Connor. Connor nodded, smiled. Torres gestured toward the main lodge. Connor hesitated. Torres said something else, still calm. Connor's smile faltered. And then Torres pulled out a radio, and 2 security guards appeared. Connor's face went pale. The guests around him didn't notice. But I saw it. I watched as they led Connor away from the bonfire toward the main lodge, and I thought, it's done. My phone buzzed one more time. "Both in custody. Come back when you're ready. I'll wait for you." I looked at my watch. 10:29. Less than 3 hours. 3 hours, and the man hired to harm me was in custody. The resort manager who'd helped him was in custody. And I was still standing. I set my drink down and walked away from the fire toward the path that led back to my villa. The music faded behind me. When I reached Villa 47, the door was open, light spilling out. Victor stood inside, arms crossed. George," he said. I stepped inside. The villa looked untouched, but I could feel it. The violation. The knowledge that someone had been here planning my end. Victor gestured toward the laptop on the desk. "Camera caught everything. He was in here for 4 minutes before Torres grabbed him. We've got him on tape trying to access the deck, and we've got the master key Connor gave him." "What about Connor?" "Secured. Torres is holding him at the security office. Sheriff's sending a boat first thing tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. I sat on the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly weak. It was over, or at least this part was. "You did good tonight, George," Victor said. "Stayed calm, played your part. We've got enough to hold Volkov and Flynn, and Marcus Reed's report ties it all back to Jessica and Daniel. What happens now? Now we let the law do its job. Sheriff will take statements, collect evidence, issue warrants. By this time tomorrow, Daniel and Jessica will be in custody too." I nodded, trying to process it. "How are you holding up?" Victor asked. I looked around the villa, the bed where I'd barely slept, the window where I'd watched Andrei's villa, the deck where I'd almost been pushed to my end. "I don't know," I said finally. "Ask me tomorrow." Victor nodded. "Fair enough. Get some rest. I'll be next door if you need me." He left and I was alone. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The bonfire was still going, the music still playing, the guests still laughing. They had no idea what had happened tonight. I pulled out my phone and opened the recording of Jessica's call. Listened to her voice one more time. "Love you, Dad." I closed my eyes. Tomorrow the sheriff would come. Tomorrow the arrests would be made. Tomorrow I'd have to face Daniel. But tonight I was still here, still breathing, still alive. And that was enough. I felt the buzz in my pocket before I registered what it meant. I pulled out my phone, the screen glowing in the firelight. One word from Victor. Now. I didn't think. I just moved. I set my drink down, turned away from the bonfire, and walked quickly up the path toward Villa 47. The music and laughter faded behind me, replaced by the sound of my own breathing, the crunch of gravel, the distant crash of waves. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give out before I even made it there. When I reached the villa, the door was ajar, light spilling out. I slowed my hand, reaching for the doorframe to steady myself. Then I stepped inside, and I saw him. Andrei Volkov stood in the middle of my room, his back to me, shoulders hunched. He was holding something small, a vial, clear glass filled with liquid. In his other hand, a small needle. Sedative. That's what Victor had said. They'd sedate me first. Make sure I couldn't fight back. Then stage the fall. But Andrei wasn't moving toward the deck. He wasn't moving at all. He was staring at something on the nightstand. The photo. A small frame I'd brought from home. A picture of Daniel and me from years ago. He was maybe 10, grinning, holding a baseball mitt. I had my arm around his shoulders, smiling like I'd won the lottery. Andrei was staring at it. I must have made a sound because he turned. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. He looked at me, then down at the vial in his hand, then back at the photo. He started, his voice rough, uncertain. And then the door behind me burst open. Sam Torres came in fast, 2 security guards right behind him. Torres grabbed Andrei's wrist, twisting it so the vial clattered to the floor. One guard kicked it away. The other pulled Andrei's arms behind his back, securing them with zip ties. Andrei didn't fight, didn't resist. He just stood there, head down, breathing hard. "Steer," Torres said into his radio. Then to me, "You okay, Mr. Harper?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. My legs felt weak. My hands were shaking. Torres turned to Andrei. "Andrei Volkov, you're under arrest for attempted harm, breaking and entering, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent." "When I know," Andrei said quietly. "I know my rights." Torres finished the warning, then gestured to the guards. "Take him to the office." They started to lead Andrei toward the door, but he stopped, turning back to look at me. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't want to do this." I stared at him. "Then why did you—" He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked down. "I needed the money." One of the guards tugged his arm, and Andrei let himself be led out. The door closed, leaving me alone with Torres. Torres crouched down, picking up the vial with a gloved hand. "Sedative. Enough to knock you out for hours." He was going to use this, then stage a fall from the deck. Make it look like you'd had too much to drink and got too close to the edge. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs finally giving out. Torres pulled out his phone. "We got his phone when we took him into custody. Want to see what we found?" I nodded. He handed me the phone, open to a text thread. The contact was just a number, no name, but I recognized it. Daniel's number. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach twisting with each line. May 18th. Job confirmed. Serenity Island Resort. Target George Harper, 67. Arrival May 22nd. Villa 47. May 20. Payment terms $80,000. Half up front, half on completion. Bitcoin. May 21st, $40,000 received. Confirmed. May 23rd. Target at bonfire tonight. Villa empty 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Window is open. And then the last message sent just an hour ago. May 23rd, 9:47 p.m., $80,000 wired. Make it look like an accident. No mistakes. I stared at the screen, hands trembling. Daniel had written that. My son. He'd typed those words, hit send, and gone on with his evening, waiting for a phone call that would tell him I was gone. "Mr. Harper." Torres's voice pulled me back. "You all right?" I handed him the phone. "That's my son." Torres nodded slowly. "I figured." Victor filled me in. "Marcus Reed's sending over the financial records, your son's debts, the forged loan, all of it. Between that and these messages, we've got enough to arrest him." "What about Jessica?" "Her too. Reed found phone records linking her to Connor Flynn. 17 calls over the past 3 weeks. And there's more. Her real name's Jennifer Walsh. She was investigated 8 years ago for her first husband's death. No charges, but the detective flagged it. We're reopening that case. I closed my eyes. Jennifer Walsh, Brian Walsh, $200,000. And now me. Mr. Harper. Torres said gently, I need to ask. Do you want to press charges? I opened my eyes. Against who? All of them. Volkov Flynn, your son, your daughter-in-law. This was a coordinated plan to harm you. We can build a case for conspiracy attempted harm fraud. They'll go to prison. I thought about Daniel, about the little boy in the photo, about the man who'd sent that text message. Yes, I said. Press charges. Torres nodded. Good. Sheriff's coming first thing tomorrow. He'll take statements, collect evidence. We'll make sure this sticks. He stood, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mr. Harper, you did the right thing. Coming here, trusting Victor, letting us catch them. A lot of people wouldn't have had the courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt tired, hollow. Torres left and I was alone. I stood, walked to the nightstand, and picked up the photo. Daniel's face smiled up at me, frozen in time, back when he still looked at me like I mattered. I thought about what Andre had said. I didn't want to do this. He'd been staring at this photo when I walked in, staring at a father and son smiling happy. And he'd hesitated. Why? I set the photo down and walked to the window. Outside, the bonfire was still going, the music still playing. I pulled out my phone and opened Victor's messages. Andre's in custody. Torres has the phone. I saw the messages. Victor's response came fast. Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I set the phone down and sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the dark ocean. Tomorrow the sheriff would come. Tomorrow the arrests would be made. Tomorrow I'd have to face Daniel. But tonight I was still here, and Andrei Volkov was in custody, sitting in a locked room somewhere, wondering how he'd ended up here, just like I was. The security office was small, windowless, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. A metal desk sat in the center with 3 chairs on one side and one on the other. Andrei Volkov sat in the lone chair, wrists still bound with zip ties, head down, staring at his hands. Victor and I sat across from him. Sam Torres stood by the door, arms crossed. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Andre looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face pale. He looked exhausted, broken. I'll tell you everything, he said quietly. I'm done lying. Victor leaned forward. Start from the beginning. Who hired you? To Daniel Harper. Andre said without hesitation. Your son. He glanced at me, then away. He contacted me 3 weeks ago through an encrypted app. Said he had a job. Said it paid $80,000. Bitcoin, Victor asked. Andre nodded. Half up front. 40,000. The rest when it was done. And you agreed? Yes. Andre's voice cracked. I agreed. I asked. The word came out harsher than I intended. Andre closed his eyes, his jaw working. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through photos. He turned the screen toward me. A little girl, maybe 7 years old. Dark hair and pigtails, a gap-toothed smile holding a stuffed rabbit. Her name is Emma. Andre said, his voice thick. She's my daughter. She's 7, and she has leukemia. The word hit me like a punch. The treatment she needs isn't covered by insurance. It's experimental, clinical trial. The only place that offers it is in Germany. $80,000. That's what it costs. He looked down at the photo. I've tried everything. Loans, fundraisers, selling everything I own. But it's not enough. And she's running out of time. I stared at the photo, at that little girl's smile. So when your son offered me $80,000, Andre said, his voice barely above a whisper, I said yes. The room went silent. Victor broke it. Show us the messages. Andre handed Victor his phone. I leaned over, reading the screen. The messages were methodical, clinical. Daniel had sent detailed instructions, arrival date, villa number, a map of the resort. He'd included my schedule. And then the final message. May 23rd, 9:47 p.m. Target will be at bonfire until 11 p.m. Villa empty. Use sedative. Make it look like a fall. Heart condition will make it believable. $80,000 wired upon confirmation. I felt sick. What was the plan? Victor asked. Andre swallowed hard. I was supposed to wait until you were at the bonfire. Use the master key Connor Flynn gave me to get into your villa. When you came back, I'd give you the sedative, enough to knock you out. Then I'd carry you to the deck and push you over the edge. Make it look like you'd gone out for air, gotten too close and fallen. And the heart condition, I asked. Your son said you take medication. Said if anyone questioned it, they'd assume it was a heart attack. That the fall was just bad luck. Bad luck. But you didn't do it, Victor said. Andre shook his head. I couldn't. Why not? Andre looked at me, his eyes shining. Because of the photo. The one on your nightstand. You and your son. He looked happy. You both did. And I kept thinking about Emma, about the way she looks at me, the way she trusts me. His voice broke. I couldn't take that from her. I couldn't let her grow up knowing her father took someone's life for money. A tear slid down his cheek. So I just stood there, he said, holding that vial, staring at that photo. And I couldn't do it. Finally, Victor leaned forward again. Andre, this is important. Was there anyone else? Did Daniel mention a backup plan? Andre hesitated. Victor pressed. If there's someone else we need to know. Andre nodded slowly. Jessica, your daughter-in-law. She called me 2 days ago. Said if I couldn't finish the job, there was a backup. My blood ran cold. What kind of backup? Victor asked. She didn't say. Just that she had someone else on standby. Someone local, in case I failed. Victor and I exchanged a look. Did she give you a name? Torres asked. No, just said he worked at the resort. Maintenance, I think. She called him her insurance. Victor pulled out his phone and texted someone. Then he looked at me. We need to find out who it is. Fast. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marcus Reed. He answered on the first ring. George, what's happened? We've got Andrei Volkov in custody. He confessed. But he says Jessica mentioned a backup. Another person. Someone who works at the resort. Maintenance. Give me 10 minutes, Marcus said. I'll cross-reference Jessica's phone records with resort employee lists. Thanks, Marcus. I hung up and looked back at Andre. He was staring at the photo of Emma, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he said again. I'm so sorry. I sat there looking at him, this man who'd been hired to harm me, this father who'd been desperate enough to say yes, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. What happens to Emma? I asked quietly. Andre looked up surprised. What? Your daughter. If you go to prison, what happens to her? Andre's face crumpled. I don't know. Her mother left us 3 years ago. There's no one else. She'll go into the system, I guess. Foster care. I thought about that little girl in the photo, 7 years old, fighting a disease, and now she'd lose her father too. Victor, I said, can we make a deal? Victor raised an eyebrow. What kind of deal? Andre cooperates, testifies against Daniel, Jessica, and Connor Flynn, gives us everything he knows. In exchange, we push for leniency. And I hesitated. I'll cover Emma's treatment. The $80,000, I'll pay it. Andre's head snapped up. What? You heard me. I'll pay for your daughter's treatment. But you have to cooperate. Fully. Andre stared at me, his mouth open. Why? Why would you do that? I looked at the photo on his phone, at Emma's gap-toothed smile. Because she's 7 years old, I said. And she didn't ask for any of this. Andre broke down sobbing. Torres stepped forward. I'll recommend leniency to the sheriff. If you cooperate, you're looking at maybe 8 years instead of 20. With good behavior, you could be out in 5. Andre nodded, unable to speak. Victor looked at me. You're a better man than most, George. I didn't feel like a better man. I felt tired, angry, sad, but I also felt like I'd made the right choice. My phone buzzed. Marcus Reed. Marcus. I found him, Marcus said. Jessica's been in contact with a man named Troy Dawson, maintenance worker at Serenity Island Resort. 2 calls in the past week. The last one was this morning. I looked at Victor. We've got a name. Victor's jaw tightened. Then we need to find him. Now. The next morning I woke to pale sunlight and the sound of gulls. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then it all came rushing back: Andre, the sedative, the photo, the backup plan. Troy Dawson. I reached for my phone. Just past 8. Then it rang. Marcus Reed. I answered immediately. Marcus. George, good news. We got him. I exhaled. Troy Dawson. Yeah, secured. Torres and his team picked him up an hour ago. He tried to approach Villa 47 around 6 this morning. Caught him with a toolkit and lockpicks. Where is he now? To security office. He's not talking yet, but we've got enough to hold him. And George, there's more. I stood pacing. What is it? Troy Dawson's been on Jessica's payroll. We found 2 wire transfers, $20,000 each, sent over the past week. Total of $40,000. $40,000. Half of what Daniel had paid Andre. Jessica had hired a backup for half the price. What's his story? I asked. 42. Maintenance worker at the resort for 3 years. Clean record until now. But here's the thing he didn't know about Andre. Jessica kept them separate. Told Dawson he was the only one. She was hedging her bets. I said quietly. Exactly. If Andre failed, Dawson was the fallback, and neither knew about the other. I sank onto the bedhead in my hands. Jessica had orchestrated this entire thing. Not Daniel. Jessica. There's something else, Marcus said. I kept digging into Jessica's background. Her real name is Jennifer Walsh. She changed it 9 years ago, right after her first husband died. Brian Walsh, I said. Right. He drowned during a boating trip on Lake Michigan. Jessica was with him. She called it in, said he'd fallen overboard, that she couldn't save him. The police investigated, but the case was ruled accidental. No charges. But the lead detective, Richard Kowalski, he had doubts. I pulled the case file. Kowalski noted inconsistencies. She said Brian fell during rough water, but the weather was calm. She said she tried to throw a life preserver, but there was no evidence she'd opened the storage locker. And the autopsy showed bruising on Brian's shoulders and back, consistent with someone holding him under. My stomach turned. Kowalski wanted to pursue it, but the DA's office said there wasn't enough evidence. So they let it go. 6 months later, Jessica collected $200,000 in life insurance and moved out of state. $200,000. The same pattern, the same endgame. She's done this before, I said, my voice hollow. But that's what I'm saying, George. Jessica Harper Jennifer Walsh has killed for money before, and she got away with it, which means she thought she could do it again. I closed my eyes. My son had married a woman who'd done this, who'd smiled at me across the dinner table, called me Dad, and plotted to take everything I had. Does Daniel know? I asked. About Brian Walsh, I don't think so. Jessica kept that buried. Changed her name, moved to a new city, built a new identity. Daniel probably has no idea who he married. I thought about Daniel, the way he'd looked at Jessica, the way he'd gone along with this plan. And I realized Marcus was right. Daniel wasn't the mastermind. He was the puppet. Sheriff's on his way, Marcus continued. Should be at the island by 10. He'll take statements. With everything we've got, the financial records, the phone logs, the messages, the confessions, we can arrest Daniel and Jessica. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, attempted murder. They're both going to prison. How long? Daniel, probably 15 to 20 years. Jessica, with her history with Brian Walsh's case being reopened, she's looking at 25 to life. 25 to life. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was tired. Thanks, Marcus, for everything. You did the right thing, George. A lot of people wouldn't have had the guts to see this through. I hung up and sat there staring at the phone. 2 hired men, Andre and Troy, both desperate, both willing to kill me for money. And behind them, Jessica, calculating, patient, professional. She'd done this before. Brian Walsh 9 years ago, and now me. But were there more people whose deaths had been ruled accidents, whose families had never known the truth? I stood and walked to the window looking at the ocean. The water was calm, the waves gentle, the sky clear. It looked peaceful, innocent. But I knew better now. I heard a knock. I opened the door. Victor stood there, coffee in hand. You heard? Yeah, Marcus called. Sheriff's en route. We'll give statements, hand over evidence, and by noon, Daniel and Jessica will be in custody. I nodded. Victor studied me. How are you holding up? I don't know. Ask me when this is over. Victor handed me the coffee. Drink this. You're going to need it. It's going to be a long day. I took the cup. Victor, thank you for everything. Just doing my job. No, it's more than that. You saved my life. Victor nodded slowly. You saved your own life, George. I just helped. He left, and I stood alone, holding the coffee, looking at the ocean. Jennifer Walsh. That's who she really was. Not Jessica Harper. Not my daughter-in-law. Jennifer Walsh. A woman who'd killed once and nearly done it again. I thought about Brian Walsh, about his family, about whether they'd ever suspected. And I thought about Daniel, about the little boy in the photo, about the man who'd sent those messages to Andre. He'd been a fool, but he'd also been her tool, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive him. I pulled out my phone and found the last text Daniel had sent me. Just boarded the ferry. Thank you again, son. Can't wait. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed a reply. Sheriff's coming. It's over. You and Jessica are going to prison. Don't ever contact me again. I hit send. Then I blocked his number. And I stood there looking at the ocean, asking myself the question I couldn't answer. How many people had Jessica Jennifer taken from this world? How many families had she destroyed? The ocean gave no answers. It just rolled on, indifferent and endless the way it always had. By 10 o'clock, the island had a different feel. The easy vacation atmosphere had been replaced by something tense, purposeful. Guests whispered, sensing something had happened, but not knowing what. I stood on the dock, watching a white Coast Guard boat cut through the water toward us. On board, a figure in uniform stood at the bow, Sheriff Douglas Miller. The boat pulled up, and a man in his late 40s stepped off, tall, solid, weathered. He wore a khaki uniform with a badge pinned to his chest. Sam Torres met him at the pier and started talking. Miller's expression darkened. Victor and I approached as Torres finished. Miller looked at me, his eyes sharp and assessing. "It's Mr. Harper," he said, extending a hand. "Sheriff Douglas Miller, I understand you've had quite a week." I shook his hand. "That's one way to put it." Now Sam's filled me in. 2 hired men, both in custody. Your son and daughter-in-law behind it. And a resort manager who helped coordinate. That about right? That's right. Miller nodded. All right, let's go somewhere we can talk. I want to hear everything. We moved to the resort's conference room. Torres, Victor, Miller, and I sat down. Miller pulled out a digital recorder and hit record. This is Sheriff Douglas Miller, Saturday, May 24th, 10:15 a.m. Mr. Harper, walk me through what happened start to finish. I did. I told him about the phone call I'd overheard, about Daniel's plan, about the one-way ferry ticket, about Victor Marcus Reed, Andre Volkov, and Troy Dawson, about Jessica Jennifer Walsh and Brian Walsh, about Connor Flynn and the master key. Miller listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back. That's a hell of a story, Mr. Harper. And if even half of it holds up, your son and daughter-in-law are looking at serious time. It all holds up, Victor said. We've got recordings, financial records, witness statements, and physical evidence. Torres slid a thick folder across the table. This is everything we've compiled. Photos, videos, confessions from Andre Volkov and Troy Dawson phone records, and the master key Connor Flynn used. Miller opened the folder and started flipping through it. His expression grew grimmer with each page. Then my phone buzzed. Marcus Reed. I stepped into the hallway and answered. Marcus. George. I've got the full financial report ready. Here's the summary. I put him on speaker so Miller could hear. Daniel Harper owes $285,000, Marcus began. High-interest gambling debts. He's been making minimum payments for the past year, but he's drowning. The lenders have started threatening legal action. And Jessica, Miller asked. Oh, Jessica Harper has $95,000 in credit card debt, spread across 7 cards, all maxed out. 2 months behind on payments. Miller made a note. So they're desperate. Very. But it gets worse. I found a forged home equity loan in George's name. $450,000. Someone used George's information 3 months ago. The bank flagged it, but $35,000 was withdrawn before they froze the account. I felt my jaw tighten. $35,000. Daniel had already stolen from me before this week even started. Can you prove Daniel forged the signature? Miller asked. I've got the documents and forensic analysis. The handwriting doesn't match George's, but it's a close match to Daniel's. Send me everything, Miller said. There's one more thing, Marcus said. Kevin Morrison. He was Daniel's business partner until 2 years ago. Daniel convinced him to invest $180,000 in a real estate deal that never materialized. Morrison lost everything. When I told him what Daniel had done, he said he'd testify. Miller leaned forward. Morrison willing to come in for a formal statement. He's already on his way to your office. Should be there by noon. Marcus hung up, and Miller turned back to the folder. He pulled out a photo, Connor Flynn, standing outside Villa 47 holding a key. Connor Flynn, resort manager. How's he involved? Miller asked. Torres spoke up. Flynn gave Andre Volkov a master key to Mr. Harper's villa. He also provided Volkov with George's schedule, and we've got phone records showing 17 calls between Flynn and Jessica Harper over the past 3 weeks. Why'd he do it? Miller asked. Dr. said him quietly. Daniel loaned him $50,000 2 years ago. Flynn couldn't pay it back. So when Daniel asked him to help, Flynn didn't have a choice. Miller shook his head. There's always a choice. Flynn made the wrong one. He closed the folder. Mr. Harper, I'm issuing arrest warrants for Daniel Harper and Jessica Harper. Conspiracy to commit murder fraud, attempted murder, and in Jessica's case, we'll be reopening the investigation into Brian Walsh's drowning. With everything we've got here, they're both looking at significant prison time. How long? I asked. Daniel 15 to 20 years minimum. Jessica, if we can prove she was involved in Brian Walsh's case, she's looking at 25 to life. Maybe more. I nodded, feeling the weight of it. Miller stood. I'm going to need you to come back to the mainland with me. We'll take your formal statement at the station, then execute the warrants. I want you there when we arrest them. You've earned that. I looked at Victor. He nodded. All right, I said. Let's finish this. We headed back toward the dock. A private boat was waiting, arranged by Victor. Captain William Foster stood at the helm. "Mr. Harper," he said, tipping his cap. "Ready to head home?" "Yeah, I'm ready." I climbed aboard, and Victor followed. The engine rumbled to life, and the boat began to pull away. I stood at the stern, watching Serenity Island grow smaller. The white villas, the palm trees, the beach where I'd walked just days ago, believing my son had given me a gift. Now I knew the truth. It hadn't been a gift. It had been a trap. But I'd survived. Victor stood beside me. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know. Ask me after it's over." "It's almost over," Victor said. "By tonight, Daniel and Jessica will be in custody, and you'll be free." Free. I thought about that word. What did it mean now my son was going to prison? My daughter-in-law was going to spend the rest of her life behind bars. My family fractured beyond repair, but I was alive, and maybe that was enough. The boat cut through the water, steady and sure. Behind us, the island faded. Ahead, the mainland grew closer, and somewhere in that city, Daniel and Jessica were waiting. They didn't know yet. Didn't know the trap had failed. Didn't know the evidence had been gathered, the warrants signed. They thought they'd won, but they were wrong. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last message I'd sent Daniel. "Sheriff's coming. It's over. Don't ever contact me again." He hadn't replied, and he never would. The boat's engine hummed and salt spray misted my face. I closed my eyes, letting the wind wash over me. Tonight it would be over. Tonight I'd face my son one last time, and then I'd walk away. For good. Before I tell you what went down at that house, drop the word justice in the comments below, so I know you're still listening. Your support keeps me going. Just a heads up, what comes next includes some creative storytelling that may not be entirely factual. If this isn't for you, now's a good time to step away and find content that fits better. The drive took 40 minutes. Victor sat beside me, Sheriff Miller and 2 deputies following in a patrol car behind us. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of the police radio. I stared out the window, watching the city scroll past. Familiar streets, familiar landmarks. Everything looked the same as it had a week ago, but nothing felt the same. When we pulled onto Oakwood Drive, my chest tightened. Number 112 sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. A 2-story house with white siding and a neatly trimmed lawn. Daniel's car was in the driveway. The lights were on inside. They were home. Victor parked 2 houses down. The patrol car pulled in behind us. Miller got out and leaned down to my window. "We'll wait here," he said quietly. "You go up, knock on the door. When you give the signal, we move in. You ready?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure I was. I stepped out and started walking. My legs felt heavy. My hands were shaking. By the time I reached the front porch, my heart was pounding. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door. The same door I'd walked through 100 times. That felt like a lifetime ago. I raised my hand and knocked. Footsteps inside. Then the door opened. Daniel stood there holding a duffel bag. His face went pale. "Cat?" His voice cracked. You're here." I didn't answer. I just stepped forward, and he moved back, letting me in. The living room was a mess. Suitcases open on the floor. Clothes scattered everywhere. And on the coffee table, stacks of cash, crisp $100 bills bound with rubber bands. $28,000. Next to the money, 2 plane tickets. I didn't need to look closely to know where they were going. Jessica appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. "George, we weren't expecting you." I looked at her, then at Daniel, then back at the money. "I know everything," I said. The room went silent. Daniel set the duffel bag down slowly. "Dad, I don't know what you think you know, but I know about Andrei Volkov." I said, my voice steady. "I know about Troy Dawson. I know about the $80,000, the $40,000, the one-way ferry ticket. The master key Connor Flynn gave them, I know all of it. Daniel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jessica stepped forward. George, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. Really, because it looks like you're packing to run. It looks like you've got $28,000 in cash and 2 tickets to Mexico. And it looks like you were planning to leave the country after I was gone. It was him. Jessica said, her voice sharp, desperate. She pointed at Daniel. It was all him. I didn't know anything about this. He told me we were going on vacation. I swear, George, I had no idea what he was planning. I stared at her, and for a moment I almost believed her. She was good, convincing, but I knew better. I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit play. Jessica's voice filled the room. Dad, how are you? How's the island? And then later, what are your plans for tonight? Anything fun? A bonfire. How lovely. What time does it start? Perfect. And you'll be there the whole evening. The recording stopped. Jessica's face went white. That's you, I said quietly. Calling me on Friday, asking about my schedule, making sure I'd be at the bonfire, so Andrei Volkov could get into my villa. Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. You coordinated this, I continued. You hired Troy Dawson as a backup. You contacted Connor Flynn. You orchestrated everything. No, she whispered. No, that's not. I know who you are, I said. Jennifer Walsh. I know about Brian, about the $200,000, about Lake Michigan. Her eyes widened. The police are reopening that case, I said. And when they do, they're going to find out what really happened to your first husband. Jessica took a step back. I turned to Daniel. He was staring at the floor, his shoulders shaking. That, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't want to do this. I was desperate. The debts, the loans, I couldn't see another way out. You could have asked me for help, I said. I was ashamed. I didn't want you to know how badly I'd failed. So you decided to end my life instead. You decided that was easier than asking your father for help. He didn't answer. He just stood there crying. I looked at him, this man who used to be my son, and I felt something break inside me. Don't ever call me Dad again, I said. Daniel's face crumpled. Please, please, The front door burst open. Sheriff Miller and the 2 deputies came in fast, badges out. Daniel Harper, Jessica Harper, you're both under arrest, Miller said. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, attempted murder. Put your hands behind your back. Daniel turned to me, his eyes desperate. Dad, please don't do this. I'm your son. I didn't move, didn't speak. One of the deputies pulled Daniel's arms behind his back and cuffed him. The other did the same to Jessica. Miller picked up the cash. $28,000, and these tickets Mexico, non-refundable. You 2 were planning to run. It's not what it looks like, Daniel said, his voice breaking. Save it for the judge, Miller said. He nodded to the deputies. Take them. They led Daniel and Jessica toward the door. Daniel kept looking back at me. Dad, please, he called out. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, please. I stood there silent, watching him go. Jessica didn't look back. She just walked out, her head down. The door closed behind them, and then it was just me and Victor standing in the wreckage of my son's life. I walked to the window and looked out. The deputies were putting Daniel and Jessica into the patrol car. Daniel was still crying. Jessica sat beside him, expressionless. The car doors closed. The engine started, and then they were gone. Victor stepped up beside me. You okay? I didn't answer. I walked out onto the porch and stood there staring at the empty driveway. The evening air was cool, the sky turning purple and orange. I sat down on the porch steps, my head in my hands, and I let myself feel it. All of it. The grief, the betrayal, the loss. Victor sat down beside me, quiet, steady. He's your son, Victor said after a long moment. That doesn't just go away. I know, I said, my voice hoarse. But he's not the boy I raised. That boy's gone. Victor didn't argue. He just sat there and we watched the sky darken. Behind us, the house was silent, empty. And ahead of me, the future stretched out, uncertain, lonely, but mine. I'd survived, but I'd lost my son. And I didn't know which hurt more. The hotel room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that pressed down on you, made you aware of every breath, every heartbeat. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folder on the nightstand. Marcus Reed had compiled everything into a single file: texts, wire transfers, bank statements, recorded phone calls. The evidence that would put Daniel and Jessica behind bars for decades. I picked it up, flipped through the pages. Daniel's messages to Andre, Jessica's calls to Connor Flynn, the forged loan application with my signature, all of it laid out in black and white. This was my son's life now, reduced to evidence. I closed the folder and set it back down. Then I opened the nightstand drawer and pulled out a piece of paper folded in half, worn at the edges. I'd written it Thursday night alone in Villa 47, after I'd first seen Andrei Volkov watching my villa. A letter, in case I didn't make it. I unfolded it slowly and started to read. To whoever finds this, my name is George Harper. I'm 67 years old. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive my trip to Serenity Island. I want you to know that I came here knowing what was going to happen. I overheard my son, Daniel Harper, planning to have me killed. He hired someone to stage an accident. He did it for money, $800,000. I could have gone to the police, but I didn't, because I needed proof. So I came to this island knowing there was a hired killer waiting for me. And I gathered evidence. If I'm gone, it means I failed. But I need you to know this: I forgive him. Daniel is my son. I raised him. I worked 2 jobs to give him a future. And somewhere along the way, he stopped being that boy. He became someone I don't recognize, but he's still my son. So I forgive him. Not because he deserves it, but because I can't carry that anger with me wherever I'm going. If there's money left, I want it to go to Daniel's children, if he has any. Not to him, not to Jessica, but to his children. Because they didn't ask for any of this. And if there are no children, give it to someone who needs it. Someone like Emma Volkov, the 7-year-old girl whose father was hired to kill me. She has leukemia. She needs $80,000 for treatment. I've already arranged to pay it, but if something happens to me, make sure she gets it. She's innocent. Howard Brennan, my lawyer, will handle my estate. He's a good man. Trust him. Thank you for making sure the truth comes out, for making sure Daniel faces what he's done. George Harper. I folded the letter back up my hands, shaking. I'd written it thinking I might not make it off that island, but I had made it. I was still here, and Daniel was the one who was gone. I set the letter down and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to hold back the tears. But I couldn't. They came anyway, hot and stinging, and I let them fall. I cried for the boy Daniel used to be, for the man I'd hoped he'd become, for the years I'd spent believing that love and sacrifice were enough. They weren't. My phone buzzed. Howard, I answered. Hey, George, how are you holding up? I didn't know how to answer that, so I didn't. I know today was hard, Howard said gently. Seeing him, hearing him beg, walking away. Yeah, I said, my voice rough. It was. You did the right thing. Did I? Because it doesn't feel right. It feels like I just destroyed my own son. He destroyed himself, Howard said. You just refused to go down with him. I closed my eyes. I keep thinking about that letter, about how I forgave him. And now I don't know if I meant it. You meant it, Howard said. You wrote it when you thought you were going to lose everything. That's when people tell the truth. And the truth is, you love him, even after everything. I don't know if love is enough anymore. It's not, Howard said quietly. But it's something. And someday maybe that'll matter. We talked for a few more minutes. Howard told me the arraignment was scheduled for Monday morning, that Daniel and Jessica would both be held without bail. I thanked him and hung up. I stood and walked to the window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Daniel was sitting in a cell, alone, scared. And somewhere else, Jessica was doing the same. Except she wasn't scared. She was calculating, but it didn't matter, because the truth was out. The evidence was solid, and they were both going to pay. I thought about the question I'd asked myself earlier. What's left? My son was gone. My family was shattered. But I was alive, and that had to mean something. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Things to do. 1. Sell the house. Too many memories. 2. Find a smaller place. Somewhere quiet. 3. Call Emma Volkoff's doctors. Make sure the payment goes through. 4. Volunteer somewhere. Library, shelter, somewhere I can help. 5. Learn something new. Dancing, maybe, or painting. 6. Live. I stared at that last word for a long time. Live. Not survive, not endure. Live. For 67 years I'd lived for other people. For Daniel. For his future. But it hadn't worked out. And now, for the first time in my life, I had to figure out how to live for myself. I didn't know if I could do it, but I had to try. I turned off the lights and lay back on the bed. Tomorrow I'd start over. Tomorrow I'd figure out what came next. But tonight I let myself feel it. All of it. The grief, the loss, the relief, the guilt. And underneath it all, something else. Hope, small, fragile. But there. I closed my eyes and whispered to the empty room. I'm going to live. Not for Daniel, not for anyone else. For me. And for the first time in a week, I believed it. 3 months later, I walked into the Riverside District Courthouse. The November sky hung gray and heavy, matching the weight in my chest. Howard Brennan met me at the entrance, his hand firm on my shoulder. You ready? He asked. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to watch my son answer for what he'd done. The courtroom was cold, and clinical rows of wooden benches facing a raised judge's bench. I took my seat in the second row, Howard beside me. Across the aisle, Daniel sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. His lawyer, Robert Bennett, leaned close and whispered something. Daniel didn't respond. He just stared at the table. Jessica sat at a separate defense table, her attorney, Michelle Stone, shuffling papers beside her. Jessica looked thinner, her face pale and drawn. She didn't look my way. At a third table sat Connor Flynn, Troy Dawson, and Andrei Volkov, each with their own counsel. Andrei's eyes found mine for a moment, and I saw something there, regret maybe, or shame. I looked away. All rise. Judge Margaret Haynes entered, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. We stood then, sat as she settled into her seat. This is the matter of the people versus Daniel Harper. Jessica Harper, also known as Jennifer Walsh, Connor Flynn, Troy Dawson, and Andrei Volkov, she announced. Counsel, are the parties ready? The prosecutor, Sarah Collins, stood. She was in her mid-40s, composed and confident. The people are ready, Your Honor. Each defense attorney affirmed their readiness. Judge Haynes gestured to Collins. You may proceed. Collins approached the jury. She spoke clearly, methodically, as she laid out the case. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about greed, betrayal, and a plot to murder an innocent man, a father who trusted his family. George Harper, the victim, sits in this courtroom today only because he was smart enough and brave enough to uncover the scheme before it succeeded. She clicked a remote, and the screen lit up with a text message. Transferred $80,000. Stage it as an accident. This, Collins said, was sent by defendant Daniel Harper to Andrei Volkov on May 23, 2025. Daniel Harper hired Mr. Volkov to kill his own father in exchange for $80,000 paid in Bitcoin. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I felt Howard's hand on my arm. Collins played an audio recording next the call from Jessica I'd recorded on the island. Her voice was smooth, almost sweet, as she asked about my medication and my plans. "Why, this woman coordinated every detail," Collins said, pointing to Jessica. "She was the mastermind. She hired a second man, Troy Dawson, as insurance, paying him $40,000 to finish the job if the first attempt failed." Collins moved to the forged loan document projected on the screen. My signature sat at the bottom of a $450,000 home equity line. Daniel had withdrawn $35,000 before I even knew it existed. Daniel Harper owed $285,000 in gambling debts. Collins continued. Jessica Harper owed $95,000 on credit cards. Together they stood to inherit $800,000 if George Harper died $350,000 from life insurance, $450,000 from his home. She turned to the jury. But this wasn't Jessica's first time. 9 years ago, her husband, Brian Walsh, drowned under suspicious circumstances on Lake Michigan. She collected $200,000 in insurance money. The case was ruled accidental, but Detective Richard Kowalski of the Chicago Police Department had his doubts. He's here today to testify. Kowalski took the stand. He described the inconsistencies in Brian's case, the calm weather, the missing life vest, the bruising on Brian's shoulders that couldn't be explained. Kevin Morrison testified next, explaining how Daniel had convinced him to invest $180,000 in a fake real estate venture. Kevin never saw the money again. I trusted him," Kevin said, his voice breaking. "I thought he was my friend." Victor Bennett took the stand after that, describing the surveillance operation on Serenity Island. He walked the jury through the timeline, the camera installation, the night Andre entered Villa 47 with a sedative and a plan to stage my fall. Sam Torres corroborated every detail. By the time Collins rested her case, the defense had little room to maneuver. Robert Bennett tried to argue that Daniel had been manipulated by Jessica. Michelle Stone claimed Jessica had been framed. Judge Haynes was unmoved. "The jury will disregard speculation," she said more than once. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. "We find the defendant Daniel Harper guilty on all counts. We find the defendant Jessica Harper, also known as Jennifer Walsh, guilty on all counts. Connor Flynn guilty. Troy Dawson guilty. Andre Volkov guilty." Judge Haynes set sentencing immediately. "Daniel Harper, you are sentenced to 20 years in state prison." Daniel's head dropped. His shoulders shook. Jessica Harper, you are sentenced to 25 years. Jessica stared straight ahead, expressionless. Connor Flynn, 5 years. Troy Dawson, 12 years. Andre Volkov, given your cooperation and personal circumstances, 8 years. Andre closed his eyes. I thought of his daughter Emma, 7 years old, and fighting for her life. I'd already arranged for the $80,000 to be sent to the hospital in Germany. As the bailiffs led the defendants out, Daniel turned and looked at me. His eyes were red, his face streaked with tears. "That," he mouthed. I didn't look back. I stood, collected my coat, and walked out with Howard at my side. Outside, the November air was sharp and clean. I stood on the courthouse steps and looked up at the gray sky. My heart felt heavy, but somewhere beneath the weight was a flicker of relief. I was still here. I was still breathing. And somehow I had to find a way to keep going. 1 year later, I stood in my new apartment in downtown Riverside, watching the spring sunlight spill through the window. The place was small, a 1-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, but it was mine. No ghosts, no memories of Daniel or Jessica. Just clean white walls and a view of the river. I'd sold the house on Maple Street 3 months after the trial. Howard had helped me sort through the paperwork. The house had been in my family for 30 years, but every room carried the weight of what had happened. I couldn't sleep there anymore. I couldn't sit at the kitchen table without remembering the phone call I'd overheard the moment my life had fractured. So I let it go. The apartment was easier, simpler. I bought a used couch, a bookshelf, a small desk by the window. I kept a few framed photos, my parents, my late wife, a picture of Daniel as a boy blowing out candles on his 8th birthday. I didn't throw that one away. I couldn't. He was still my son, even if I didn't recognize the man he'd become. Most mornings, I walked to the Riverside Community Center. I'd started volunteering there in January, teaching basic math to kids who struggled in school. At first, it was just something to fill the hours. But somewhere along the way, teaching became more than that. It reminded me why I'd chosen this profession for the moment a kid's eyes lit up when they finally understood a problem. One of my students, a 9-year-old girl named Sophia, had been failing her multiplication tables. By March, she was solving 2-digit problems in her head. Her mother hugged me after class and said, "Thank you for not giving up on her. I told her I never would, and I meant it." Victor and I met for coffee most Wednesdays. He'd retired from private security in December. We'd become close over the past year. We went fishing every Saturday morning, driving out to Lake Harmon with sandwiches and coffee. His stories reminded me that survival wasn't just about getting through the hard times. It was about finding a way to live afterward. One Saturday in late March, Victor asked me if I'd heard from Daniel. I shook my head. "He writes me letters. I don't read them." Victor nodded, didn't push. After a while, he said, "You did the right thing, George. You know that, right?" I wasn't sure I did, but I appreciated him saying it. Howard handled the rest of my estate planning that spring. After selling the house and paying off the remaining debts, I had a little over $700,000. I set aside $200,000 for myself. The rest, $500,000, I put into a trust for Emma Volkov. Howard raised an eyebrow. "Andre's daughter, George, you don't owe her anything." "I know," I said. "But she's 8 years old. She didn't ask for any of this. And her father made a mistake, but he was trying to save her life. I can't ignore that." The money would be held in trust until Emma turned 18. I wrote her a letter to include with the documents. "Dear Emma, my name is George Harper. You don't know me, but I knew your father. He made a mistake, a serious one, but he did it because he loved you more than anything in the world. I hope you never have to make the kind of choices he made. I hope you grow up healthy, happy, and surrounded by people who care about you. This money is for you. Use it wisely. Live a good life. Sincerely, George." In February, I'd run into Nathan at a coffee shop, the dance instructor I'd met at the bonfire on Serenity Island. When he invited me to try a beginner's ballroom class, I surprised myself and said yes. The first lesson was awkward. I stepped on my partner's toes twice, but Nathan was patient, and by the 3rd week I was getting the hang of it. The box step, the basic foxtrot, the slow rhythm of the tango. Dancing wasn't about perfection, Nathan told me. It was about being present, feeling the music, trusting your partner, letting go. By April, I was going twice a week. I even performed a short routine at the studio's spring showcase, a waltz to an old Frank Sinatra song. When the music ended and the small crowd applauded, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride, joy, freedom. One evening in late May, I stood on the dance floor after class alone. The studio was empty, the lights dim. I closed my eyes and took a slow, deliberate step forward. Then another, and another. The music was only in my head, but it was enough. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't waiting for the next disaster to find me. I was living. Finally, truly living. And for the first time in a year, I believed I deserved it. The evening of the spring dance showcase. I stood backstage at the Riverside Community Arts Center adjusting my tie. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from anticipation. Through the curtain gap, I could see the audience filing in, about 50 people. Victor sat in the 3rd row, a small smile on his face. Howard was near the back, reading the program. Nathan appeared beside me, clapping me on the shoulder. "You ready, George?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure. "You'll do great," Nathan said. "Just remember, it's not about the steps. It's about the feeling." Across the backstage area, Margaret was stretching. She caught my eye and gave me a reassuring nod. Margaret was 65, a widow who'd lost her husband 2 years ago. Dancing was her way of learning how to move again. We were dancing a waltz together tonight. The lights dimmed. Nathan welcomed the audience. Then the first pair took the stage. One by one, students performed. A young couple danced a tango. An older man performed a foxtrot. The crowd applauded after each piece, and then it was our turn. George Harper and Margaret Sullivan performing a Viennese waltz. Margaret and I walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the audience a blur. My heart pounded, but I took Margaret's hand, and we assumed our starting position. The music began a slow, sweeping melody. I counted the beats. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We stepped forward together, moving in a gentle arc across the floor. At first, I was hyper-aware of every movement. But then somewhere in the middle, I stopped thinking. I let the music carry me. I felt Margaret's hand in mine, the rhythm of our steps, the way we moved as one. For those 3 minutes, nothing else existed. Not the audience. Not the past. Not the weight of everything I'd survived. Just the dance. When the music ended, we held our final pose. Then the audience erupted into applause. Margaret squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. "We did it," she whispered. "We did," I said. After the showcase, there was a reception, coffee, cookies, congratulations. Victor shook my hand. Howard clapped me on the back. Nathan gave me a quick hug. But after a while, I needed air. I slipped out and walked down the street toward the beach. The sun was setting, casting the sky in shades of pink and orange. I took off my shoes and walked along the sand, feeling the cool grains beneath my feet. The waves rolled in gentle and rhythmic, and I stood at the water's edge watching the horizon. A year ago, I'd stood on a different beach, Serenity Island. I'd been sent there to vanish, to become another old man who'd had an accident. My own son had orchestrated it, but I hadn't let them. I'd fought. I'd planned. I'd survived. And standing here now, I realized something. Survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about what you did afterward. It was about choosing to keep going even when the easiest thing would be to stop. I was 68 years old. I'd lost my son. Not to an accident, not to illness, but to his own choices. He was alive, sitting in a prison cell, but the boy I'd raised was gone. That loss would never stop hurting. But I couldn't carry that weight forever. I couldn't let it define the rest of my life, so I'd made a choice. I sold the house. I moved to a new city. I started teaching again. I made new friends. I learned to dance. I started over. People talk about second chances like they're rare. But the truth is, every morning is a second chance. Every breath is an opportunity to begin again. It's never too late. That's what I'd learned. It's never too late to change, to grow, to find something worth living for. I looked out at the ocean, at the waves rolling in and out, endless and patient. The world kept turning. The sun kept rising. And so would I. I turned away from the water and walked back toward the lights of the city. My feet left prints in the sand, soon to be washed away by the tide. But I'd been here. I'd stood here. I'd lived. And tomorrow I'd do it again. I smiled. Not because everything was perfect. Not because the pain was gone. But because I was still here. Still breathing. Still moving forward. I was 68 years old, and I was just getting started. If you've stayed with me through this entire family story, I want to share something I've learned. When I was 67, standing on that island, I thought my life was ending. But looking back now, I see God had other plans. He gave me the strength to survive when I had every reason to give up. This family story taught me that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. I lost my son, but I found myself. I lost my trust, but I gained wisdom. Through it all, I learned that forgiveness isn't about them, it's about freeing yourself. To anyone hearing this dad revenge tale, understand this revenge wasn't what saved me. Planning, yes. Fighting back, absolutely. But revenge would have consumed me. I chose survival over bitterness. I chose life over hate. That's the difference between justice and dad revenge. One builds you up, the other tears you down. Don't be like I was, blind to the warning signs too, trusting, too willing to ignore the red flags. Watch the people closest to you. Protect yourself. And if you ever face a dad revenge situation or a difficult family story like mine, remember your life is worth more than their greed. If this moved you, please leave a comment below. Hit that subscribe button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. Thank you for following George's journey to the very end. I appreciate every one of you. One final note. This narrative contains fictionalized elements crafted for educational purposes. If this content doesn't resonate with you, feel free to explore other stories that better suit your preferences.